All right, and as we promised you on The Explainer, we're talking about the 10-point agenda and its implementation in the country, signed by the president, who's the party leader of UDA, and the former party leader of ODM, Raila Odinga, almost about a year ago now, in March of 2025. And we're speaking with Dr. Agnes Zani, who chairs that committee on the implementation. Thank you for joining us on The Explainer. Let's start by just understanding you have been out gathering views of the people. Why are you speaking to the people, and what do you hope to get out of that process?
Thank you very much. And these are very important questions, because what are we trying finally to achieve as a committee overseeing the implementation of the 10-point agenda and the NADCO report? And as you've rightly said, from the MOU that was signed on the 7th of March between His Excellency the President and the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga are now the let. What are we trying to achieve? We are trying to look back at the NADCO report and its raft of recommendations. For example, starting with electoral justice and related issues, talking right through the boundaries issues, IEBC and the selection committee, the audit of the 2022 general elections, and then moving to very key important issues that are found in the MOU itself, includes the NADCO report again and the 10-point agenda, and specific issues which are very, very key. For example, issues under Article 43, issues of rights, for example, housing, education, being able to afford the cost of living, and generally the issues of the cost of living. Then moving to issues of fidelity of political parties, moving to the national government funds, and then lastly, the new offices of the leader of official opposition, and also the Prime Minister position.
Yeah, and we'll talk about those issues, but the purpose of collecting the views from the people?
We are collecting the views from the people because we are assessing to what extent the recommendations that have been put in the NADCO report have been actualized. This committee for the first time has been given a chance, and in the recommendations that there would be a follow-through. So we are looking at what was to be achieved. So for example, if we're looking at the issue of the IBC and the selection committee, is that in place? Is the electoral law in place? Is the selection committee in place? So we're going back again to look at what recommendations have been given in the NADCO report, and then we're going to ask the relevant authorities, because we are overseeing the implementation, we're not implementing ourselves. So in a sense, we're secondary implementers rather than primary implementers.
But you're asking members of the public whether these things have been done.
Yes.
We surely know that there are some gaps. I mean, what will you do with the views that you gather from the people? So, for instance, if you're taking a look at whether legislation has been done to effect some of the issues, which we will get into in a moment, what do you hope to get from the people?
We hope to get a sense of whether the NADCO recommendations have been achieved in the long run. And the implementing agencies are well known. For example, it could be the ministries, it could be the independent commissions, but also the public. For example, if you're dealing with issues, for example, like the wage bill and corruption, for example, and we want to get a feel of whether this has been achieved or not, yes, we're going to the public offices and asking and getting the requirements and the answers for this. But we're also going to the public as part of a process to find out from them to what extent, for example, do you feel corruption has been addressed? Not in terms of quantitative data, but as qualitative data. And they can tell us this, and they have a feel of this. We've gone for about 4 public forums right now, starting from Kisumu, Homa Bay, Migori, and tomorrow we'll be in Siaya. And we're getting a feel about what people are saying about the NADCO report and its recommendations. For example, if they're talking about corruption, we're asking them to what extent do you feel corruption has reduced? Is it completely eliminated? What sort of issues are coming? Issues of inclusivity, for example.
And then what do you do with that data and their sentiments? Where does it go, and how does it contribute to the implementation of the 10-point agenda?
We are putting all this together as part of what is required from this committee, putting it all together, and then it's going to be part of a report that's going to be given on the 7th of March to all the principals, to both the principals. But if you look at the implementation strategy, and especially where certain issues, for example, it is if it is an issue of corruption, and we are also liaising with ESCC, we're getting from ESCC what are the issues and to what extent have they been addressed. We'll put those issues and say we have reached to this point, in terms of implementation or trying to address the issue of corruption, and we've moved to this point. If we're looking, for example, at the issue of the wage bill, we're going to ask the members of the public, what do you feel about the wage bill, which stands now at about 12.07 trillion? And we're going to ask, what do you feel about the wage bill? But we're also going at the same time. So for every one question, we're not just going to one space to ask for the answers. We're getting answers from multi-sectoral groupings so that we get the feel of what it is. And then at the end of it, we'll put all this together. We'll be able to have the report. And then from there, the various significant relevant stakeholders are taking action. So for example, on issues of the wage bill, we're in touch with the National Treasury already and economic planning. And we've asked them, to what extent have you dealt with this? And then they will give us that feedback, and we'll be able to see from that and gauge whether that particular issue has been effectively tackled.
All right, let's talk about the funding of the committee. What's your budget?
We haven't operated with the budget as such, because for the first time, this committee is a committee that has been supported by political parties rather than from the exchequer.
How much have you received?
We don't have the figures in terms of what we've received. We're receiving it in terms of support and when and if it is needed at the various times. So far from what we've been able to receive, we've been able, for example, to have an office. We have an office at Magadi at KCC. We've been able, for example, to do the public engagements. We've also been able, for example, to do some of the stakeholder participation.
So there is no budget?
Because let me tell you what has happened and is continuing to happen even within the political parties. For example, tomorrow we'll be having a meeting, and we have consequent meetings. Political party can say, for this particular engagement, let us give this particular amount. So right from the beginning, we have not operated with a full-blown budget. We have made suggestions and recommendations for figures that can be given to complete the task, but we're relying on the political parties.
Yeah.
And they give and when and if, and also in terms of support. For example, if it is in terms of employment and tasks that have to be given, we're giving this to the political parties. We're not necessarily employing new people. So we don't have the standard budget that most committees like this would have.
So how much support, financial or otherwise, have you received from both parties? Because we understand the funding for this was to come from ODM
from
and UDA.
ODM and UDA. Yeah. So ODM and UDA have given their proportions of monies to both the processes and the stakeholder investment. Most of this money is being taken from the political parties directly into the activity. So apart from what we discussed initially when we were thinking about a budget that we would work on, and we were not able to do it that way, we're operating on a need as we go.
Okay.
So for example,
as you go basis,
yes. Mm-hmm.
Up until this point, how much have you received in money, in terms of funding?
We might not have received money in terms of funding, but
so you haven't received any money?
What I'm saying is, for example, we've been the public forums.
Yeah.
At the public forums, when we have been at the public forums, we've been able to mobilize people. For example, we've been able to articulate, we've been able to go through the sessions with this, not necessarily by having the money and saying this is the amount of money and this is what we're doing with them.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I asked this question is because it's an accountability one.
Yes.
Certainly, it takes money to move you from point A to B.
Yes.
And when you get there, you would need accommodation, you would need transport,
exactly.
you need some sort of facilitation.
Exactly.
So how much have you spent on that up until this point?
We're not going to have figures like the way you envisage them to be, because some of the figures and money that is coming in will still come in. For example, tomorrow, we can say for this particular activity, ODM, we need to mobilize and be able to get to other public forums within the country. This is our budget for this particular time. We're going into, for example, Mombasa County, and we need this amount of money. So we don't have a kitty where we've put in everything. That sort of accountability that we're talking about will come at the end, when we'll be able to give our figures and say, at the end of the day, this is what we've spent and this is how we've spent it.
Yeah, and who will you be giving that accountability report to for that amount of money that's been spent? Because that is taxpayers' money, is it not?
It is taxpayers' money. It is also money that when we do the report, we are reporting to the principals this particular report is a bilateral and bipartisan process between two political parties. So the report is going to the principals and to the general director generals and finance directors of the two political parties.
Right, but the accountability of those funds should also be to the people of Kenya.
Yes, but
not just to the principals.
Yeah, but you know that in political parties we have auditor generals who, at the end of the day, will go through the money that has been spent within political parties.
Right, but the political parties are funded by the Exchequer.
Yes, they're funded by the
political parties fund.
Yeah, by the political parties fund, which is audited by the Auditor General. So at the end of these processes, and when we're done with all this, the Auditor General, on an annual basis, comes to the political parties, and they look through to see what the spend is like across the political parties. So when they come to that, so therefore we're being very, very diligent with the funds that we're using. In fact, for many of the activities, we're telling the political parties, we're going to such and such a place. Can you organize this sort of forum for us? When we're meeting with the stakeholders, we're moving around and meeting the stakeholders and going to their offices and getting the data and the memoranda from them.
So let's get into some of those issues, for instance, that you're taking a look at, and perhaps in the NADCO report. So your committee is overseeing the implementation of those reports. You've got just about a month, a little over a month to go. Actually, a little less than a month, because your final report is due on the 7th of March. So part of the NADCO report was to audit the 2022 elections. How far are we with, has there been an audit done, and by whom?
So we've got to be able, first of all, to distinguish between the implementation and the overseeing of the implementation. In the NADCO report, there is meant to be the audit of the 2022 elections. There was meant to be a team of 6 experts who should have been put into that team to be able to do the audit for that particular session. So we are going then to check at what point are we in terms of that implementation. So for the audit of the presidential election that was done, we're going to go, for example, to the IBC and say, for this particular issue of the audit of the report, where are we? We're going to go to the executive office, for example.
Can I ask you when you're going to do this? Because you have less than a month.
Yeah, because our system, maybe if we start with preparations and how we're going to do it, we're using memoranda. We are asking questions around the various issues, including the audit, and therefore we're going to ask and say, where are we as far as this audit is concerned? We have not to confuse the implementation and overseeing.
Right, but as overseeing, allow me to ask this question.
Some of the issues have already been implemented. Other issues might not have been
and we will
implemented.
get to the ones that have and have not. But on this particular issue, you are overseeing the implementation. So suddenly by now you have a report as to where each of these items is.
Yes.
And so my question to you is, with respect to auditing the 2022 elections, where are we with that?
So what is going to happen?
Because you're overseeing the process of that implementation. So where is it now?
We are overseeing the implementation, and the data is coming in terms of memoranda. We're going to put memoranda all this data. We're going to get memoranda, especially for the audit of the 2022 elections. We're going to get it from the IBC. We're going to ask them because they have been requested to do that. We're going to get it from the executive office, for example, of the president, to ask where has this process gone. Apart from that audit, you remember also regarding the issues of the commissioners, the 4 commissioners, there was meant to be mercy and pardon and a provision for that as well. So we're going to ask, for example, the party leaders of the political parties, to what extent has this gone? And then from the memorandum that we're going to put, we're going to consolidate and put the report. The report is due on the 7th of March. There are 3 weeks to the 7th of March, and we're very cognizant of this. But once the data comes in, from the various...
So at this point, you do not have a progress report on the audit of the 2022 elections? Because you've been saying you will ask, so you don't have this.
Now, let me tell you, let me just go right into that, and that is the audit report. The audit report, this is the Executive Office of the President, as I've said to you, the PS State Department for Parliamentary Affairs. There is a panel to jointly appoint a reputable firm, consortium of firms to undertake the evaluation.
Okay, so has that firm been, has that firm been established or, contracted?
Now, there are 2 things that I have to make very clear. There's the required action All right, and the required action is to have the panel to jointly appoint a reputable firm.
Okay.
That
so has the
panel,
that
panel that is to be put into place is the responsibility of the National Assembly and the Senate, State Department for Parliamentary Affairs. We are doing a memorandum, guide and request to ask them, because they're implementing, to say, how far are we regarding this panel, for example? How far are we regarding the 6 experts to evaluate the 2022 process, which was to have been put 21 days after the adoption of the report? Where are we with that? They are the ones who will tell us where we are. It is not us as a committee who now will tell you, Yvonne, that this is what has happened.
No, but all I'm asking
yes.
as the role of overseeing the implementation.
Exactly.
Certainly you would get a report on point this.
Exactly.
This is where we are.
Exactly.
But it sounds like you are still going to ask.
No.
So you haven't established the progress of the implementation of the process of auditing the 2022 elections.
We have already looked at this rough set of issues in the agenda and in the 10-point agenda, and also in the NADCO report. The NADCO report is the first part of the 10-point agenda. And for each of them, the first is the audit of the 2022 presidential election. This is the third issue within electoral justice and other related matters. The panel to jointly appoint a reputable firm, the one that you're talking about is a panel consisting of 6 experts to evaluate the 2022 electoral process.
So do we have that panel in place?
That panel and being put in place is the responsibility of the executive office of the president. So what's the responsibility
as overseeing?
The PS, State Department of Parliamentary Affairs, National Assembly, Senate, and the National Treasury.
I understand that. The reason I'm...
From them, we have already sent out the memorandum guide requesting for the and in that, this is the question we've asked. And we've asked them to tell us, has this been effected?
Okay.
If it hasn't been, why? What are the suggestions? What are the challenges?
Okay.
And
so
that
have
is
you
when...
asked them yet?
Yes, we have. We have, because we've already
Have they
sent
reported
out.
back?
They're going to report back in memoranda. The memoranda are coming in.
Okay.
So when the memoranda is coming in, when all of them are together, we already have a team. We already have a set of the whole report and the structure of the report. And we're inputting the various bits. So we're not answering the questions on behalf of the responsible people and the implementing agencies.
Okay.
We are an in-between carrier to make sure that this issue, which is very key, does not go. Neither are we just looking at that issue. We're looking, for example, at the amendment of the elections 2011 to provide for a scope of evaluation, financing, and reporting after the general election. Again, the various levels of responsibility, because this has to do with a legislative proposal. We're moving to the National Assembly and the Senate, and we're asking again in the form of a memorandum guide. These memorandum guides have already been given to 208 stakeholders. Among those stakeholders, we have ministries, we have PS departments, we have independent commissions, and we're just not asking one issue to one particular institution. We're asking to a variety of institutions who are critical in giving those answers. Then when they have given those answers in those memoranda that have come, we're going to put together that whole memoranda that we have received from the various places and put it as part of the report.
Okay, all right. We have much more to talk about when we return. Do we take a break first? Let's do that and come back with some news. And please keep your questions and comments coming in for Dr. Agnes Zani from the committee overseeing the implementation of the 10-point agenda and the NADCO report. We'll be getting into some of those details, much to talk about. Let's take a break here on The Explainer. When we return, more with Dr. Agnes Zani.